next time you're late for work, it's worth remembering that nothing gets in the way of a Land Rover. The best 4x4, by far.
Here in Arizona, the West can still be wide.
Don't put your daughter on the stage, Mrs. Worthington. Once you couldn't buy a thing here without gold, but these days you're safer with plastic. But after a T-burn, will your card cut the mustard?
Nope.
Surprisingly, in the States, Barclaycard is welcomed at thousands more places than certain charge cards I could mention. Personally, I'd be thrown without one.
For details, dial 100 and ask for free phone Barclaycard.
Appleford's Cluster. 2 deliciously crunchy and 2 delightfully chewy snack bars. Wouldn't you like to get your teeth into one? Interested in keeping in trim? Then don't miss the fitness show at the NEC. Try out the latest equipment. Take part in Keep Fit. Enjoy aerobics, feats of strength and much, much more all day long in the Activities Theatre. The first ever fitness show starts Thursday, September the 4th, NEC, Birmingham.
TV Times for winning lines with vouchers for £90,000 worth of prizes. It could be your number that comes up if you get this week's TV Times.
Tonight sees the start of an exciting new series of Delon movies on Central. France's premier tough guy seeks revenge for the death of a cop.
Where's Perez?
Perez, that's why I've been calling your place.
Hey.
Watch it, will you?
For the death of a cop, tonight at 10:45 on Central.
That follows the latest national and international news from the studios of ITN with news at 10-ish.
The phone box where George Stephenson gave himself up. Mr. Scargill wins a nuclear freeze, but no more from the TUC. In Soweto, stone-throwing, tear gas and simple fear. Olivia Channon's friends tell the inquest how she died. And Wales at Harvard, a scholarly junket. Good evening. 3 men are being questioned in Hampshire tonight about the murders at a country house near Fordingbridge. One, the former handyman, Mr. George Stephenson, gave himself up to police early today after a night's drinking. He's said to have talked in one public house of having big worries. Mr. Stephenson dialed 999 at 1:42 a.m. from a campsite near Brockenhurst in the New Forest. He waited for police to come for him. At 2 a.m., armed police who'd surrounded a house in the Bell Green area of Coventry arrested Mr. George Daly, aged 24. 9 hours later, his brother John, who's 20, was arrested in a street in Coventry city centre. The Dalys hired a car with Mr. Stephenson in Coventry on Monday.
This evening, the man police had been hunting for more than 2 days was taken from Lymington Police Station to the Hampshire headquarters at Winchester for further questioning by CID officers. Stevenson had given himself up overnight at this campsite in Hampshire's New Forest, just a few miles from Burgate House. In the early hours, he dialed 999 from this call box and asked police to come and get him. In Coventry, 2 brothers who'd been seen hiring this Red Rover with Stevenson on Monday morning were also arrested. They are George and John Daly, both Irish and both unemployed. This evening they were driven south for questioning by Hampshire detectives. Details are now emerging of Stevenson's movements in the last week. It's known that he checked into the campsite on Sunday with 2 women. They pitched their tent here. A nearby camper said they tried to remain discreet.
They sort of fenced themselves off. They had the car in front of the tent to sort of prevent people seeing what they were doing or taking, quite closed in.
But by the morning of the next day, Monday, he was hiring a car in Coventry, which he returned here on Tuesday, the day after the killings. Then, yesterday evening, he travelled back to the town of Brockenhurst by train, returned briefly to his tent, and went out drinking. At one stage, he joined another couple for a game of pool, but then the barman remembered he sat quietly on his own.
There's a guy sitting in the corner of the bar over there, by himself, looking very nervous, and sitting on the edge of his seat, a little bit twitchy, looking around all over the place, probably listening to what we were saying.
The two brothers, George and John Daly, have arrived in Hampshire tonight and are thought to be being held here at Lyndhurst, where the murder inquiry is being coordinated. James Mates, News at 10 in Hampshire.
The Trades Union Congress voted overwhelmingly today for a freeze on building new nuclear power stations and for a review in the light of the Chernobyl disaster. The Congress narrowly rejected a call backed by Mr. Arthur Scargill to start scrapping Britain's nuclear stations. The margin was just 60,000 out of over 9 million votes. The Siemens' Mr. Jim Slater said the nuclear station at Hinkley Point in Somerset had come within an ace of a disaster. The TUC also voted, without opposition, to campaign against what it called the evil policies of apartheid.
A small but well-organised group of nuclear workers had come to Brighton to warn the delegates about the threat to their jobs if it became official Labour movement policy to close nuclear stations.
I've got come on, Jim, and I worked with radiation before they were born, and they've all normal, mate.
So what's going to be happening?
Miners' leader Arthur Scargill was their main target.
You listen to the debate, and when you've listened to the debate...
He tried arguing but got nowhere.
Growing.
Others chose not to try to argue at all, but inside the argument was clear-cut.
We don't say depend upon coal. We talk about oil and gas. We talk about solar tide. And if a fraction of the millions of pounds that have been expended on the nuclear industry had been expended in those fields, we'd have an alternative energy policy today that would meet the requirements of the British people.
And we've got trade union members coming to this rostrum who I've heard saying fight for jobs. Yes, Arthur, you'll see a fight. If anybody for a second thinks that we'll let our members down in this industry, a crucial, necessary part of high technology, it won't happen. It just will not happen.
Mr. Slater produced a log of the alleged near disaster at Hinkley Point, but the power station manager's leader said a Chernobyl could never happen here, partly because of the skills of his members. It may have been enough to sway the vote, which, however close and unexpected, could help Neil Kinnock in his much more difficult attempt to stop Labour going completely anti-nuclear. Afterwards, Mr. Slater produced the nuclear expert who'd evaluated his Hinkley Point evidence. He said 3 operator errors had led to the reactor going 1/3 of the way towards a disaster.
But if this had carried on, then perhaps it would have reached Chernobyl-type proportions. It could have reached in the extreme.
But the generating board said the allegations were reckless and alarmist. Design differences in British reactors meant a Chernobyl-style accident could not happen here.
The incidents show that no matter what you do to our reactors, they close down safely and there's no harm to the public. The reactor, the safety part of the reactor, operated exactly as it's supposed to do.
The afternoon at Brighton was dominated by South Africa, with so-called Flowers of Freedom on sale to help raise funds for the TUC's anti-apartheid campaign. Leaders of South African trade unions came to hear the debate, which included a demand that Britain adopt sanctions and that trade unionists here boycott South African goods. Delegates were shown a TUC anti-apartheid video voiced by Dame Peggy Ashcroft. It won't be seen as a TV commercial because it's political, but will be screened in the cinemas.
White South Africans have 1 doctor for every 330. Blacks have 1 doctor for every 19,000. So if you buy a Cape apple today, you really are helping to keep the doctor away.
Giles Smith, News at 10, Brighton.
South African police and troops today stopped attempts to hold a mass funeral in Soweto, the Black Township complex near Johannesburg, for the 20 Africans killed by security forces last week. Apparently none of the dead was buried. There was violence, though new censorship kept reporters and cameras out. One new death was reported, a black woman hit by a train when she was chased by young militants trying to enforce a work boycott. This report was compiled under restrictions imposed by the South African government.
As the police and army sealed off the township, there were running battles during the morning between gangs of youths and the security forces at makeshift barricades erected during the night. The violence quickly spread to the cemetery where thousands had gathered. Correspondent Mike Hanna watched from the edge of Soweto.
The people of Soweto are attempting to bury their dead at the Avalon Cemetery just over the hill behind me. And what we cannot show are the clouds of tear gas over the graves, the purple dye being sprayed on the mourners for future identification and possible arrest.
Clergymen formed a wall between police and the mourners who were incensed that the funerals had been stopped.
We did our best to stand between the army, the police, and the people. It seemed a very sensitive situation, and it was quite clear that the army and the police were ready to even shoot the people. And we did our best to stand between them.
The services today were marked by another mass boycott. Whether out of a spirit of remembrance or intimidation, parts of Johannesburg were virtually deserted this morning. Some of those who defied the boycott hid their faces for fear of retaliation. One simple fact remains. Just a few miles down this road, the people of Soweto once again confronted South Africa's security forces. And once again, that confrontation went unreported. With the first 4 funerals now set for tomorrow, the government in Pretoria will be delighted tonight at the success of the state of emergency's latest press restrictions. Peter Sharp, News at 10, outside Soweto Township.
The Foreign Secretary, Sir Geoffrey Howe, is going to Washington on Monday for talks about South Africa. And tonight the United States said it was extending the limited sanctions it imposed last September. It'll review these after a further meeting of European leaders. And America has said it will talk to Mr. Oliver Tambo of the African National Congress, even though the ANC has not renounced the use of violence against the South African government.
It was here at the Foreign Office that the Americans revealed their change of heart. Until now, the Reagan administration has refused to meet the ANC because it advocates using force. But Mr. Chester Crocker, President Reagan's African Affairs envoy, told Sir Geoffrey Howe that Mr. Schultz will now meet the ANC's Mr. Oliver Tambo very soon. Sir Geoffrey had wanted to meet Mr. Tambo on his abortive swing through southern Africa in July, but the ANC boycotted his efforts. In Harare, Mr. Tambo confirmed he'll meet Messrs. Schultz and Howe. Tonight, British and American officials are finalizing dates and places, giving the ANC a profile that both have sought to avoid. The Americans also announced tonight that the limited US sanctions banning sales of computers and Krugerrands are to be extended. Back in June, the European Common Market agreed a package of much stronger sanctions against iron, steel and coal from South Africa, but these were only to be triggered after 3 months if Pretoria was to be found unwilling to institute reforms. Those 3 months are now up, and in the rustic setting of Brockett Hall in Hertfordshire this weekend, European Community foreign ministers meeting informally will agree that no progress has been made. Indeed, one British source accepted that Pretoria has actually regressed. The ministers meeting here will have been told by the Americans that further joint measures with Europe will now be considered that could include banning South African Airways flights into Europe and America. The Brockett Hall meeting will then, for example, ban all imports of South African coal. During the miners' strike here, Britain imported some £40 million worth of it, and Europe currently imports at least 10 times that amount. But what happens after these sanctions are imposed? Well, in the words of one official here, that's a complete unknown. John Snow, News at 10 at the Foreign Office.
An inquest has heard that Miss Olivia Channon, daughter of the Trade Secretary Mr. Paul Channon, died from a lethal mixture of heroin, champagne and Guinness. Miss Channon, said to be no stranger to drugs, died after end-of-exam celebrations in Oxford. She was said to have been the life and soul of the party. The coroner recorded a verdict of death by misadventure.
The tale emerged this afternoon of a wild end-of-examinations drinking party the night Olivia Channon died. It began, witnesses said, the second Olivia Channon finished her exams, with friends showering her in expensive champagne. Count Gottfried von Bismarck then invited the party back to his Christchurch rooms. They drank more champagne there and mucked about. Von Bismarck said drink was to blame for his vague memory of the night's events. But Sebastian Guinness, third cousin and lifelong friend of Olivia Channon, remembered more. They went out again, he said, and drank champagne and Guinness, black velvet. Olivia Channon at one stage ordered a pint of sherry. They were all, he said, very drunk. The party adjourned again to von Bismarck's rooms, and Sebastian Guinness told the coroner that it was in the bathroom there that he saw Olivia Channon take something. It was plain, he said, it was heroin. She took it from a tube, snorting it up her nose. Rose Johnston, Olivia Channon's best friend, said she knew her friend had taken heroin with her when she'd left home that day. She was aware, too, that Olivia Channon was no stranger to drugs. Nicholas Vincent, nicknamed Sid, he and Miss Channon crashed out on Bismarck's bed. He woke up several times and thought she was still asleep, thought there was nothing wrong. Olivia Channon died of what doctors called a deathly cocktail of heroin, alcohol and amphetamines. Recording a verdict of misadventure, the coroner said the evidence he heard here today spoke volumes of the dangers of drug taking. Vernon Mann, News at 10, Oxford.
The captains of both the Soviet liner and the cargo ship involved in the Black Sea collision have been arrested for violating safety rules. 116 bodies have been recovered, and Soviet television has shown for the first time pictures of the huge air and sea search for 282 people still missing. Divers have been going down to the wreck, banging on the hull to test if any passengers have survived in air pockets, but they found no signs of life. The Greater Manchester Police Authority are to put a formal list of written questions to the city's Chief Constable, Mr. James Anderton, about his conduct. The move comes 2 weeks after the authority reinstated his deputy, Mr. John Stalker, after deciding to take no disciplinary action over his professional behaviour. And Vauxhall Cars said today it wants 1,000 redundancies to cut waste and keep its share of the market. The losses will be among hourly paid workers at Luton and Ellesmere Port. They'll be asked to take early retirement.
The Prime Minister said today that the government can offer no guarantees against unemployment. Speaking in Scotland, she said it was up to workers and management to create.
It was a rather grim-faced Mrs. Thatcher which emerged on a computer before her very eyes at a textile college. Perhaps with good reason, with opinion polls in Scotland showing the Tories in dreadful shape, last with 15% of the vote. Unemployment's the chief reason, so this Scottish visit was important for what it reveals of Mrs. Thatcher's policy on jobs. And in a Scottish television interview tonight, she held out no hope to Scotland or anywhere else in Britain of instant relief from the government.
No government in a free society can guarantee jobs to every man and woman and young person. You can do it if you have total direction of labour, if you have a total communist society. But we would not want that, and we don't wish to have it. The only security you get from employment is that of being able to satisfy the customer. There's no other way. There's no other way any government can give you security. Any government. No way any employer can give you security unless continually you sell to and satisfy the customer, both here and overseas.
The Prime Minister is still convinced that things like new technology, here at a military electronics factory, better management and harder selling will produce jobs. She is completely dismissive of Mr. Kinnock's ideas on a big new push for jobs announced earlier this week. He's wrong, and not for the first time, she said today. Michael Brunson, News at 10, Edinburgh.
In the fight against drugs, it's the menace of crack that looms ever larger. The deals, the dealers and the victims. A report next. Plus the doctors who say premature babies are dying unnecessarily. And our man in Massachusetts makes it a red letter day. That's in a couple of minutes.
Chop, chop, busy, busy, work, work, bang, bang. Chop, chop, busy, busy, work, work, bang, bang. Chop, chop, busy, busy, work, work, bang, bang. Chop, chop, busy, busy, work, work, bang, bang.
In business, an encouraging phone call just to say thanks a lot can often really get things moving.
Chop, chop, busy, busy, work, work, bang, bang. Chop, chop, busy, busy, work, work.
For all business, great and small, make that call.
You have that way of knowing what to do and what to say. The world looks great when I'm with you. The sky is yours alone. I see you smile, I see you care. Singapore girl, you're a great way to fly.
Dreft has always cared for your clothes in a hand wash, but you can care for them in a machine wash too, with Dreft Automatic.
You do like it, darling, don't you? You are happy with it?
Head over heels. Drawers under the bed? Whose drawers, Sheil?
These drawers.
Now that's smashing.
Oh, that's nice.
Doesn't it feel good?
I never thought we'd get into real leather.
Living in style and paying less. ELS? Oh, yes.
Hi, it's Rusty here, just to say a word about my great new Caribbean restaurant. Flavors your mouth won't believe. The tastiest dishes, best of puddings, a great atmosphere, and my super lunchtime menu. See you all at Rusty's, the taste of the sun at 69 Hurst Street, Birmingham.
Buy your next car from John Miskin Motors, the Nissan dealer with the brightest name in Banbury, and claim your free spending vouchers in our super £60,000 giveaway bonanza. But hurry, this offer simply must finish by the end of September. John Miskin Motors, Southern Road, Banbury. Phone Banbury 68491 now. It's where great motoring starts.
Walsall Illuminations, the fun family night out. Meet Postman Pat again and see our new airport feature. Open nightly August the 29th till October the 5th. OAPs and children under 10 free.
President Reagan and his wife Nancy are to go on television together in 10 days' time to warn of the growing drugs crisis in the United States. And a 2-hour documentary shown on television across the United States has spelt out the threat from the cocaine drug crack. It's a highly concentrated form of cocaine which is cracked into pellets and smoked through a glass pipe. It causes a surge in blood pressure, and heart failure is the most common form of death. Users become addicted in less than 2 weeks. In America, most users are between 20 and 35, but 1 in 6 children try it before they leave school.
What are you